take a look behind any fat PS2, you're going to find a hole. Yeah, I'm on camera right now to call you back. If you ask any real gamer what this hole here is for, they're all going to tell you it is there to hide weed. However, after checking every single PlayStation 2 hardware manual for every single region, what we found out is that your PS2 reroll is actually an expansion bay, and it's there to feed a hard drive and a network adapter. Hey, some of you might understandably dismiss the PlayStation 2 expansion bay as useless. After all, when Sony launched the PS2 Slim, they removed hard drive support completely. And it's not like anyone would ever make a console revision removing something that is actually useful. So I guess the real question here would be, was the PS2 hard drive ever actually useful? The number of games requiring you to have a PlayStation 2 hard drive to play is a staggering 1. There are a bunch of sports games that let you use the hard drive to improve replays, and there is one game that lets you use the network adapter and the hard drive combined to download extra maps from the internet, or used to when the servers were still up. If you compare this with the first Xbox that would come out 1 year later, there you could actually use the internal hard drive to save your data, for example, instead of having to use memory cards. Those really make the PS2 look like an ancient relic. To be fair, there were a few games that would let you use the hard drive to save your data, and they would also use it to cache some data to make everything run faster. Now, of course, this feature was only reserved for games that truly push the PS2 hardware to the next level. Like here, we have The Urbz,
featuring the Black Eyed Peas.
But what's weird is that in 1999, when they announced the PS2, Sony was super ambitious. They wanted the PS2 to be the ultimate media center. To put this into perspective, this was the year when Blue WWI came out, and they were already talking about downloading games over the internet and buying subscriptions for online services. And when the PS2 actually dropped, they kept talking about stuff. Between 2001 and 2002, Sony actually made headline news talking about their collaboration with Real Player to actually stream videos on the PS2. They were also working with AOL to let you browse the internet and chat and send emails from your PS2. But in the end, we got nothing. You could do some of the stuff using PS2 Linux, which lets you use your PS2 as a Linux computer, but that's not what I'm talking about here. All of the stuff they were announcing, downloading videos, downloading games, sending emails from your PS2, that never happened. So why didn't Sony ever fulfill their promises, huh? Why did they leave our metaphorical PS2 hole in our heart empty? Did they hate us? Did they hate me? Because I'm European, maybe?
Yes.
What? Starting from the year 2000, Sony of Japan actually began delivering on their promises, releasing PlayStation 2 web browsers, adding hard drive support to a lot of games, and moving forward in 2002 releasing something called PlayStation Broadband Navigator. The problem is that all of this, PSBBN, the internet browsers, are a private party. It was only meant for Japan. We were not invited. To the point where PSBBN is so region-locked, it is not just checking for your console's region like NTSCJ, it is also checking your console is not one of the few Japanese consoles that were resold in South Korea or Taiwan. It is insane. However, we don't have to worry about this because we don't live in 2002, so if you have a PlayStation 2, a fat one, a PS2 hard drive, a way to connect that PS2 hard drive to your computer, and an official Sony network adapter because the third-party ones don't work with PSBBN, you're pretty much set. You can very easily obtain the English translation of PSBBN made by Cosmiscale on the internet, and then all you have to do is connect your PS2 hard drive, which has to be bigger than 120 gigs, to a computer running Windows. In my case, I modified the network adapter to support SATA, and I'm using an SSD, but yeah, you take the disk you want to use with your PS2, and you just use HDD raw copy to flash the English patched image to that drive. And then you put everything back together in your PS2, and hopefully it should just work. PSBBN is a lot of things at once. It is, first and foremost, a software update that completely replaces and upgrades the normal PS2 dashboard, adding a lot of cool new features. It is also the PlayStation Network. In 2002, I'm not trying to make an hyperbole here. I'm literally saying that most of the stuff that you can do on the PSN was probably something you could already do in 2002 using PSBBN. And finally, PSBBN is also Linux. Under the hood, it is unironically just a very heavily modified version of PS2 Linux. In the early 2000s, some Americans even managed to use this to their advantage and got PSBBN to boot on some American PS2s, and then Sony patched this exploit. The way PSBBN is structured is very similar to the Wii menu. We got the channel section here, and we have the game channel, the movie channel, the music channel, and finally the photo channel. Now, to begin here, I would really like to show you the music channel because I think it's the best showcase to display how PSBBN basically makes your PS2 a PS2 Pro. Okay, so every PlayStation 2 can of course play music CDs, and it's not even that special a feature. The PS1 could do it. Your grandma could probably also do it if she owned a laser pointer. So if I go here to disc, I can play the music that's there just fine on PSBBN. It is replicating the feature of the normal PS2 dashboard. What's new here is this little icon on the bottom right, because if you press it, you can read the entire CD to your PS2 hard drive. This feature was also present in the first Xbox, but the base PS2 cannot do it because memory cards are like 8 megabytes and the Xbox hard drive is literally 100 times bigger. But here with PSBBN, we have a hard drive, so we also finally get to do it. You can just copy your entire music collection or someone else's music collection if you are a pirate to your PS2 and just never have to use optical media again. But there is one cool new thing PSBBN can do and the first Xbox cannot. If you have a NetMD MiniDisc Walkman, I actually have two of them for some reason, you can actually connect it using USB 1.1, where is my cable, to copy songs from your PS2 to a MiniDisc or vice versa. So in this case, I can go to collection, I can go to album tree, and then by doing options and checkout, I can copy the Crazy Frog to several MiniDiscs. I just made a new copy of the Crazy Frog, which is arguably more dangerous than AGI. Now, if I go to information here, it actually shows us that you can only copy a song for a given amount of times, but this is very easily bypassable. Sony actually removed this feature in the last update to PSBBN in 2004 because, yeah, it's basically a piracy machine. But the English version I'm using here was actually patched to have the feature added back. So in order to make some money, I did try getting into piracy and selling MiniDiscs, but nobody really seemed to be into what I was selling, except for a few people who kept asking me if I was selling something called Yandi. Yeah, it's the Crazy Frog, you know. It's that 18 times. Hello? Hello? Fucking scammer, I'm gonna call the police on this guy. Oh yeah, since PSBBN is basically a penguin in disguise, you can just plug a USB keyboard and use that to type the name of your songs, which is way better than any on-screen keyboard. Now, speaking of stuff you can plug to your PS2 using USB, let's briefly talk about a photo channel. And this channel is meant for you to be able to plug in your Sony camera using USB and watch your pictures on the big screen and also copy them to the hard drive. The problem is that I couldn't find any compatibility list of any cameras that actually work with this. So I have zero clues on what cameras would actually work here. I found a 2001 article talking about cameras supposedly compatible with the PlayStation 2, but then they're talking about something called Picture Paradise, which is not related to PSBBN, so I have no idea how to make this work. If you have any info on where to find a compatibility list, please let me know, because I spent hours on this and found nothing. If you pay close attention now, you can read the letters here, PS2 and not PS5, which means my console has games. Alright, so if you open the game channel and you go to collection here, you're going to be able to either boot a game from your disk drive, like normal on a PlayStation 2, or directly from your hard drive. I told you this was basically the PSN in 2002, but the way this worked is actually a bit different than what we are used to. The original PSBBN server shut down in 2016, but a community led by someone named Vidas155 actually managed to back up everything and bring them back online with an English translation. It is far from a perfect translation, but it is perfectly usable. Instead of having a centralized shop channel like the Wii Shop or a centralized news channel like the Nintendo channel, on PSBBN, every company was free to make their own channel with their own graphics, their own music, and it is basically a window into how different companies wanted to be seen by the public in the early 2000s. It's actually quite interesting. The kind of stuff you could do on these channels and download from these channels varies wildly. You could download entire online multiplayer games like the MMORPG Nobunaga Ambition Online, or Net the Bomberman, which was free to download, but then you had to pay 500 yen a month to play it. Now, these games are archived, but they relied on online servers that currently have not really been reverse engineered, so we can't play these games. But there are a few games that were downloadable from here that don't need online servers and are still playable. This is Bishi Bashi 3 Special, and it shouldn't be able to exist. It's a PlayStation 1 game that you could download from the Konami channel and that you could run from your hard drive. And that is impossible with the PlayStation 2 hardware. It's something you can do. The way a PlayStation 2 can play PlayStation 1 games is by having a PS1 CPU on board. But that CPU doesn't have any access to the hard drive, so Sony decided to just build an entire PS1 emulator in software just to run this one game. The emulator is called POPs, and it's probably the same emulator Sony will then go on to use to run PS1 classics on PSP. But it's funny to me that on PS2 they only used it for this one game. Hello, this is Editor Femi here. I found out that this emulator was actually hacked by the community, and you can now use it to launch games from USB. Usual console hacking community win. Using PSBBN, you could also download some exclusive online DLC for some games like Bomberman Kart, but there is one impressive thing you can do even right now on the archival servers, and that is if you go to the Hudson channel and you click play games, there are some games that you can directly play on the channel. You don't have to download anything. These are like Hudson classics from the 80s and 90s, and they just work, and they even have a high score system where you can submit your score. Another thing you can do on these channels is download game trailers and just watch them on your PS2. After you download them, they actually get saved to the remaining channel that we haven't seen yet, the movie channel. We'll talk about that one later. But the main thing you could do here in a lot of these channels was actually just staying up to date when it came to new games coming out. For some reason, Sony on their PlayStation Now channel was pushing a fucking gambling simulator. My favorite thing here on the PlayStation Now channel is that you can actually check every single accessory Sony was selling for the PS1, PS2, and PSP in 2006 with pictures and a description and the price in yen. Everything in the game channel feels like a time capsule, so I genuinely suggest you check it out yourself. Unfortunately, there is no way to currently emulate the network adapter on PCSX2, but if you want, I've recorded an entire session where I just go around and check out every single sub-channel here on the game channel, and it's up right now on my Patreon, notaponziski.me. Remember how at the start of the video I said that Sony was collaborating with RealPlayer to let users play videos on their PS2s? Well, that turned into the movie channel, which is basically just a very heavily reskinned version of RealPlayer. From here you can either play DVD movies or the various trailers you can download from the game channel. Now, Vidas155 managed to understand precisely what video format this player is expecting, but there is no way to play videos over USB. You have to actually host your own fake server and make your PS2 download them. So while that isn't really convenient, it also means you could potentially host your own video channel for PSBBN users and distribute videos to them using that, which is pretty cool, actually. Okay, so we checked out every channel here. End of the story, right? Wrong, because we are talking about Sony here. Sony from the early 2000s at that. So they really went above and beyond when it came to making a new dashboard based on PS2 Linux. For example, you can use the keyboard to navigate everything here. You don't need to use your controller at all. And if you go to the system settings, they also managed to revamp the memory card save manager, and it lets you save data to and from your hard drive. So you don't need to buy another memory card if you have PSBBN. You can just move the data from the games you completed to the hard drive and keep using the single 8 MB memory card you bought with your console over and over again. It is not as good as the first Xbox, letting you save directly your data to the hard drive, but it's very close now. Something that is very hidden for some reason is if you go in the internet settings and you select the option to configure your router, PSBBN is going to close itself and open a fully functional web browser. For 2002 standards, it is not working great right now, but a cherry on top is what happens when you press select at any given moment when running PSBBN, because you get access to this home screen very similar to the one Wii has, but you can see there is an option called Mail, and that's a fully working email client that you can still use today, and it's running 24/7 in the background if your PS2 is on with PSBBN open. You could and still can use your PS2 to send and receive emails. So after checking out all of this, you might be wondering, why didn't Sony ever release PSBBN here in the West? Well, they actually planned to release it in North America. They originally mentioned it in a press release, but then they went and stealthily modified it to remove any mention, and apparently the reason behind it is very simple. Japan had very fast internet in the early 2000s, and we didn't. But in the end, this was a cool adventure, and I think PSBBN is genuinely going to be hard to beat as the ultimate oddity for the PS2. Well, that'll do.